Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you are new. To give you a little bit of an introduction to myself, my name is Loz. I am a natural female competitive bodybuilder and I am also an online coach for competitive and non-competitive bodybuilders. And in today's video, I am finally going to come around to discussing how I gained 15 pounds of muscle naturally in my last off season. I took 4 years off away from the stage, from my first time on stage to then my second time on stage. Throughout that time, I did gain 15 pounds of muscle naturally, and I think it's very important for me to talk through that process to hopefully just provide a little bit more insight as to how you can truly maximize your progress potential in your off season in general, especially in maybe your first or your earlier off seasons, and ultimately just how, as a natural athlete, speaking from my side from a female perspective, but honestly just for everyone, how you can ultimately maximize your potential progress throughout that time frame. So first and foremost, I want to give a little bit of context on my journey, especially leading up to that first main big off season where I took the more significant steps forward. I did my first prep in 2020. That was off the back of starting training back in 2017. So I first started training for bodybuilding in 2017 when I was 16 years old. I spent a good few years just kind of trying to grow, as most people do when they get in the gym. You're bulking for a little bit, you cut back, bulking, cut back, but I was never really stepping forwards massively. Not until I started working with my first coach in 2019. I did my first structured off season, which was only 8 months before I then did my first prep in 2020. So in 2020, I did my first prep, my first competitive season, where I ended up just doing the one show because of obviously the pandemic and shows being minimized. I competed in bikini that year, where I basically came away from that prep realizing what I wanted to achieve moving forwards and what I wanted in terms of my overall bodybuilding process moving ahead from there. The things that I realized were, number one, I didn't really enjoy competing in bikini. That wasn't really something that felt super in alignment with the way that I feel comfortable on stage, the way that really reflects the way that I like to train. It just didn't feel like me. So I was like, okay, I don't really want to compete in bikini. I also knew though that I wanted to continue competing naturally, as in that first season I didn't actually know about natural or tested federations, so I just competed in like the NPC here in the UK. So I was like, okay, I actually want to continue to compete naturally, and I want to have the opportunity to compete in drug tested federations, which I actually didn't know a lot of in my first season, and I started to become aware of that towards the end of that first season, and that was actually when I met AJ. So AJ Morris, as many people know, that is my partner, and he kind of introduced me to the world of natural bodybuilding, and I realized how many opportunities were available. So I wanted to have the opportunity to actually compete in classes like figure, or move up the ranks. That was something that obviously wouldn't really have been possible for me in the NPC side of the sport whilst staying natural. So that was a route I wanted to go down, and also at the same time I just knew I wanted to build a lot more muscle. I came off the back of that first prep and I was like, wow, I need a lot more muscle to be competitive. Yes, I was still only young, so I was 19 when I did that first show, but it doesn't matter how old you are. In order to be competitive, I needed more muscle. I needed just more muscle maturity. So that was my main goal, was right, next time I step on stage, I want a significantly improved physique. I want more muscle. I want more muscle maturity. How am I going to do that? So where did I start? What did I have to do? What were the goals that I set? Now, the first thing that I set for myself from the get-go was appreciating that I was going to need time. I knew that it was going to take a good amount of time for me to naturally build the muscle that I needed in order to step up and be competitive with these girls who, are competitive in the figure divisions, which was really the next step upwards. And I also knew that I needed time to build muscle maturity, especially not being somebody who genetically responded like an absolute freak to training. Some people do, but I knew I wasn't in that camp. So in order for me to make big steps in progress, in order for me to be competitive, that was something that I knew was going to take time. So I initially actually thought, 3 years will be enough, and I thought I'd get back on stage in 2023. But as I came around to 2022, I was like, wow, yeah, I still need more time. So I ended up actually going another year and competing in 2024 instead. So that was the main thing, was time. And then obviously you break that down into what you actually need to do in that time in order to step forwards and make serious improvements in muscle mass. So we're going to break that down now below. So point number one, taking into the off season, the most obvious point, which is be in an actual surplus. Be in a surplus, be in an environment where you can actually put on muscle mass for as much productive time as you possibly can do. So that does not mean just gaining endlessly or gaining as much body weight as you possibly can do or eating as much as you can, but it's about eating in an appropriate surplus, realistically seeing 1 to maybe 1.5% of your body weight rise per month. Obviously basing that off of body comp feedback, general feedback on performance and other variables, because you need to be in that environment to grow with a surplus where you can drive up performance, to actually have the ability to create the stimulus to grow, but then actually have the tools available with the surplus in order to actually put on muscle as a result of that. And there are two main takeaways from this if you want to actually maximize that time spent growing. Number one is don't just gain as much as you possibly can gain. A lot of people misinterpret off seasons or growing phases for bulking phases. And that's where I don't like using or interchanging the terms bulking or growing or bulking and improvement, because bulking insinuates just literally gaining as kind of much weight as you can do, and people think it's just about getting heavy and it's just about eating loads of food, and it's actually not. You need to gain at an appropriate pace so that, yes, there's obviously going to be some body fat alongside of that, but you're not gaining body fat at a rate relative to muscle mass that then is going to start creating diminishing returns, or things are going to just start to get unproductive. And then that kind of leads on to the second thing, which is don't just keep gaining when things are then getting unproductive. So if you do start to notice that body comp is getting unproductive, you're getting a little bit too soft, starting to see negative returns in performance in the gym, negative returns in appetite, digestion, just do a little bit of a pullback. A long off season is not about spending all of that time just gaining. And you also don't want to be spending all of that time holding around the same weight. You want to be in that environment of a surplus in order to grow. So the best thing you can do is have phases of pushing up and phases of pulling back. Usually I would try to, over that time frame, have anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe 10 at the maximum months of pushing upwards, and then you do a pullback. So every single year through that off season, I did some form of 10 to 12 week diet. So 2021 did a diet, 2022 did a diet, 2023 I did a diet, 2024 I prepped. But it was a case of push up, pull back, reset, set a fresh baseline with regards to body comp, with regards to variables, create a new runway of being able to progress your training, continue to then put on muscle mass. Holding phases have got their merit at different points. And if you're finding that you've only been in a growing phase for like 2 months and you think, oh, I've got to pull back again, maybe hold, maybe improve your routine, your variables a little bit more before you think you need to pull the plug, because you want to try and get a bit more time out of it. But there is that push and pull mechanism in order to make sure that all the phases are as effective and as productive as possible. Now, point number 2 that I focused on and that I was very, very aware of when I went into this off season was that I was going to need to be accepting of weight gain and getting uncomfortable. As I've already touched on, being in a surplus and growing muscle is something that will come with some body weight gain. You will need to get heavier. That's just going to be part of the process. But remember, as I've already said, it's not just body fat, and I think that's something that obviously a lot of females are scared of, is they think body weight gain is 1, a negative, and 2 is just going to be body fat. But that's actually not the case, because body weight gain comes with a lot of positives. Like for me, even in that situation, the off season, some of that body weight gain comes from just being at a healthier body weight and not being stage lean. So there's hormonal health, well-being benefits that come with that. But there's also the fact that you're able to perform better with more body weight on you. Additional body weight is not just body fat in the body weight. There is also muscle mass. You know, when you're actually training, when you're executing the process well as a bodybuilder, you will be gaining muscle alongside that body weight. But there will be some elements of having to get uncomfortable, especially in your earlier stages of bodybuilding when it comes to pushing up body weight. Like for me personally, in that off season, I went from 95 pounds as my final stage weight in 2020. And the heaviest that I got throughout that off season was 145 pounds. So that was 50 pounds of body weight total on somebody who is 4'10". And I've spoken about this actually in a separate video before, which I will link somewhere in the video now for you to watch if you want a bit more insight on that. That was definitely like more at the extreme end for sure. I think when you do look at that though, there was probably 15 to 20 pounds of that was just healthy body weight, maybe 10 to 15 pounds of that extra muscle initially in that phase. And then the rest of it was, you know, some extra body fat along the way as a bit of cushioning. But I think there were a lot of really valuable lessons to take away from pushing up so much and pushing my body to those points of discomfort, because prior to that, I'd never been heavier than 125 pounds. So I was exposing myself to seeing how far I could push in a lot of different areas. And I think that helped me physically and mentally in a lot of different ways as well to kind of break through new boundaries. And I can say for certain that if I did not experience those new levels of discomfort, I absolutely would not have achieved those new levels of growth, because you do have to embrace discomfort in some capacity in order to see new levels of growth moving forwards. Growth will not come from you just sitting in your comfort zone, because nothing's really changing when you're just staying in your comfort zone. There was no way that I could expect myself to gain 10, 15 pounds of muscle if I only wanted to stay within 15, 20 pounds of my stage weight. Not naturally. That wasn't something that was realistically going to be the case, because I wasn't creating an environment to gain more than maybe a few pounds, especially because I wouldn't be pushing performance, which I'll come on to in a second. I think maybe going up to that 50 pound mark was a bit far. I think 40 pounds would have been probably good enough. And I learned that limit there, you know, being probably still in like the 130s, high 130s was where it was really productive. That final like 5 or 10 pounds maybe took it a bit far, but I definitely learned my limit, and I understood like I need to embrace some elements of discomfort, and I'm going to have to accept that I will look a bit softer. I will maybe not look like I train as much as I do when I'm shredded, of course not. But I need to be here because this is the environment that I need to be in to train hard. This is the environment that I need to be in to grow and to build really, really good baseline levels of muscle mass on my physique that I just did not have yet, especially at that earlier point in my training career. I think this is where understanding that these bigger push-ups especially do maybe hold a little bit more utility in your earlier phases of your bodybuilding journey, when you're building those baseline levels of muscle mass and also performance. Because you will struggle, or you will find that progress is definitely a lot slower if you are trying to take these like gaining approaches where you basically just hold the same body weight over and over again. Like, how much better do you think I would have really looked if I just stayed between 100 or 110 pounds and I just stayed there? I wouldn't have seen as significant of a shift in terms of muscle mass. There is some element of understanding that your body comp will look a little bit different in those phases. Like, you might have some of those moments of feeling like you don't look like you train, but that is all in benefit of understanding it's leading you to the long-term goals that you want to see, and it will pay dividends further down the line. When you have less muscle mass, naturally those body comps will maybe look a little bit softer in your earlier off seasons, but then the more times that you also spend at certain body weights, the better and better they get. So this is a big part of embracing the discomfort, because I remember the first time that I hit 130 pounds in that off season, I felt so uncomfortable, like really, really uncomfortable. And then eventually in like 2022, then 2023, 130 pounds actually felt really comfortable. And I actually felt like my body composition looked much better, because funnily enough, I'd gone heavier than that and built more muscle and come back down. So every time I went up and then pulled back down, I had more muscle and more muscle and more muscle at that body weight. That's just that process of kind of honestly trusting the process, trusting the discomfort, and realizing that the more you do something, the more you go somewhere. Honestly, the less discomfort you experience, the more that you actually are able to keep moving forwards. Now, as I said, with that bigger push-up as well, being upwards of like 50 pounds above my stage weight, would I recommend this for everyone? No. Is it necessary? Also, no. But I also think it still had use. I like to find the limits in my own process and learn a lot from that. But also at the same time, I think the main reason why that was so beneficial for me was because of point number 3. Now, point number 3 was how much I needed to improve my training performance and how much I needed to utilize all the tools in my arsenal to improve my training performance as much as I possibly could do. This is why how uncomfortable you get and how much you embrace discomfort is really dictated by this third point in terms of how beneficial it is, because the main reason why pushing up so much was so beneficial was because I really utilized that to my advantage to drive up my training performance, to do things in the gym that I'd never ever done before. You know, I went from being 95 pounds and only being able to RDL 70 kilos to being as heavy as I was, but being able to consistently pull over 120, 130 kilos and even doing like, 3 plate pulls, squatting multiple plates, like things like that I just would not have been able to do if I stayed lighter. And this is a really big thing that I do believe in, especially as a natural bodybuilder and also as somebody who hasn't built that foundational level of muscle mass and strength, is that there is a lot of utility in getting a little bit softer whilst it's still productive, utilizing that body weight to really leverage performance, because you do not have any other forms of assistance to help you to leverage performance. You don't. So you need to utilize the tools as effectively as you can do in order to see that. And I really committed myself over that time to improve my performance as much as I can, learn from the people around me. Obviously, I'm very fortunate to have AJ as my partner. I trained with him a lot, and it wasn't just about, the execution, him improve my programming, but it was seeing what he was doing in the gym and the likes of so many other people in the natural bodybuilding space, and realizing what I could do with my performance moving forwards, removing barriers and limitations. Really, prior to that off season, I'd had a very small girl mentality, and I had to really change that into a big girl mentality. Obviously, being bigger helped me with that because I was safer and I was more powerful, but I really used that to my advantage. If I had not used that to my advantage, being that heavy really wouldn't have had merit. I would have just been getting softer. I would have just been adding on more body fat. That wasn't helping. But I can categorically say that I utilize that body fat to my benefit to make significant steps forwards in muscle mass that I would not have been able to do if I'd stayed a little bit lighter, if I'd not progressed my performance as much as I had done. At the end of the day, this is bodybuilding. You're creating the stimulus to grow through the work that you put in the gym. But I think a really key element of this that I want to touch on is how well you have to also manage your process in order to get the benefit of being heavier and still being productive. Because this was actually something somebody mentioned in that previous video that I did on gaining that much body weight, and they said, I think you're kind of overlooking the issues you encounter from getting this heavy and the fact you're not productive. And they're absolutely right, because there is like a curve of diminishing returns. You go up, and then eventually you start to see diminishing returns once you get to a certain point in terms of body weight. And that's where you're seeing insulin sensitivity issues. So you're becoming insulin resistant, you are becoming unfit, you're becoming too heavy, you're losing mobility. Absolutely, that's a problem. But you can minimize or you can expand the positive returns that you're actually getting, and you can delay the point at which you start to see diminishing returns by how well you manage your process. Because some people who go into the off season and they don't keep good routine, they don't keep good structure, they get a few months in and it doesn't really matter how heavy they are. One, maybe they have got a bit heavy too fast, they've not managed it well. But two, they've also gotten to this point where, because they've just not managed their process well, they've got 12 weeks in and they're already struggling with appetite, they're already struggling with their mindset, their headspace, all of these different things. So as a result, they start seeing diminishing returns really fast. But you can elongate, open up more time of you being in those productive phases by managing your process better. But the reality is that's really hard. It's really hard to manage your process really well, manage your structure, manage your routine really well, like do your steps, do your cardio, keep your meal timings absolutely bang on, nail your sleep, like do all of those things. When you're getting heavier, you also feel less motivated because you're not seeing those positive returns as you would do when you're dieting and you're getting leaner day by day. You're seeing the scale weight, you're seeing the improvements. You don't see the improvements in the same way. If anything, when you're growing, you sometimes feel like you're going backwards. because you're seeing that addition of body fat. You're not seeing the muscle that you're building day by day. It's hard. You're not getting that instant gratification. But if you really, really want to make the most out of those phases and have long, fruitful growing phases, you need to manage your routine really well. And that was the one thing that I worked on, definitely got better over my off season, but I was also very aware of was like, if I want to make the most out of this time frame, I need to treat this just as seriously as I would do a prep, as I would do a diet. And I learned a lot in my first prep about how I could improve my routine, how I could make certain things better. And I really, really cross-transferred all of those things over into my off-season. And if anything, I made them better. And I'll actually leave a link in the description down below to a podcast I did on not getting lazy in your off-season, because that is really the gateway to making the most out of those phases, because it's hard. Like, it's hard to spend a long time in the off season. And I think that's the thing that people forget when you set yourself this big goal and your understanding of, okay, I need a lot of time to improve. I need a lot of time to make improvements. But the problem is most people can't spend that time making improvements. And they either pull the plug too soon because they haven't managed the process well, or mentally they're also not in a position where they've been able to simply just keep going because you struggle, you're not seeing the progress as much. Or they just spend a lot of that time in unproductive phases. So they spend a lot of that time just holding or not really moving backwards or forwards, they're just kind of hovering. So it is hard to make a long off season productive, but if you work hard at it, it will pay massive, massive, massive dividends. So I think the main things to take away from this whole video are that, one, remember, change will not come without change in all aspects. You know, maybe changing your routine, changing your approach, changing your process in terms of exposing yourself to new levels of discomfort for longer periods of time than you ever have done before. If you want to see change, you need to embrace change. Within that, obviously, don't be afraid of bigger push-ups. Don't be afraid of pushing yourself beyond limits that you maybe thought previously weren't possible. Be open to the fact that you can push on those limits, and if you truly believe in something, it's very likely that you will be able to act on that and see the actual outcomes that you want. And finally, if you really, really want to see those big, significant changes, you need to be committed to the long game, and you need to understand that bodybuilding especially, but long improvement phases, particularly as a natural athlete, when you can't see those improvements maybe as considerably as you might do if you're an assisted athlete, you don't really see the true extent of your progress until you do come all the way down. You need to have trust and faith, not just in the process, in your work ethic for sure, but do have faith in the fact that you are putting in the work, and understand it will pay dividends over the longer time frame. I am fortunate that I've had this mentality throughout my bodybuilding journey of understanding that results will not come overnight, results will not come in 6 weeks, 12 weeks. They're going to take a longer period of time, and I've learned to really appreciate that delayed gratification. Because one, there is still so many wins that you can take in the day by day in that process, ticking off your boxes, knowing you're doing everything you need to do to progress. But there is also understanding that when you do come to that point of revealing the progress, it feels amazing when you actually execute that next prep, when you actually come down, when you reveal that progress and you see all the work that you've put in. And you just have this feeling, especially when you go into like that prep, you step on stage of like, yeah, I've done everything that I could have done to push my limits and learn more and be the best I could be. And that was the best thing for me about that last prep, was that I knew no matter what the placings were, even how I looked, but I knew I was going to be happy with my look. I knew I was going to be happy with the level of muscularity because I'd done everything I could to improve. And I was. And that was amazing for me to go from being a bikini competitor to stepping on stage as a figure competitor and a women's bodybuilding competitor in that time frame. That was a huge achievement for me, and I set the goal to continue to do that moving forward. So hopefully that's helped to provide you a bit of insight on that. If anyone's got any questions, please do feel free to leave them down below. If you've got any off-season goals yourself, also leave them in the comments, because I'd love to read other people's goals, and also if there's anything I can contribute to that, I'd love to be able to. Please make sure to obviously give the video a like, subscribe if you have enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, if you want to follow along this next current off season that I'm on as well, please do stay tuned for more videos to come.